Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, tonight's shir is sponsored anonymously and also b'schus the Heilige Yeshua and Parnasa and Refuah for particular neshamos who are supporting the shir. And tonight, just a little bit before we open up into a Torah, which we're just going to begin, we'll talk a little bit about Rabbi Nosson of Nimerav, whose Yahrtzeit it is tonight in Eretz Yisrael here, not yet in America. But it's funny to talk about Rabbi Nosson in a specific way because that implies that we're not always talking about Rabbi Nosson whenever we talk about Rabbeinu. And to celebrate the neshama of Rabbi Nosson and to try and focus in on the strength of the neshama of Rabbi Nosson would almost minimize our relationship with Rabbi Nosson, because by speaking about him on a specific day would leave the impression that we don't speak about him every day. And when it comes to Rabbi Nosson, there's never a day, there's never a moment where a person is entering into the world of Rabbi Nachman that they're not also encountering the world and the light of Rabbi Nosson. As Rabbi Nachman himself said, without my Nossonal, we have nothing. Nosson, it's the language of giving, it's the language of receiving. That Nosson is a palindrome. It goes back and forth in the same direction. It's the bidirectionality of receiving from above and sharing with that which comes below. And Rabbi Nosson was the pipeline. Rabbi Nosson was the malchus to the light of Rabbi Nachman. And therefore, we always are talking about Rabbi Nosson. We're always, anytime we enter into the reality that there was a tzaddik like Rabbi Nachman of Breslov and Metzias, and we know of his books, and we know of his eitzos, and we know that he existed, and we're not kofar in the power that this tzaddik had, and we attempt to connect ourselves to this tzaddik, it's all b'schus Rabbi Nosson. And the secret of Rabbi Nosson is that Rabbi Nosson knew somehow what was going to be. Rabbi Nosson knew the medicine that would be necessary for the generations way after him. Rabbi Nachman had a number of Talmidim. There were a number of very close Talmidim who were brilliant Talmidim, who were creative in their Torah, but none of them went on to become a Rabbi Nosson. And so what was it about Rabbi Nosson that made him unique amongst the Talmidim of Rabbeinu? One of the innermost points of Rabbi Nosson was that Rabbi Nosson understood that the Nachal Nevei Makor Chachma, the light of Rabbi Nachman, and the Chiddush Kamona Lohaya Me'olam, and that a Chiddush like Rabbi Nachman has not yet been in this world. Rabbi Nosson understood that that was true then, and it's also going to be all the more true the further on you descend down into the bottom of history. That by Ikvasa the Mashiach, Basof, in the end, Kulam Yu Breslov, not because everyone's going to say, wow, Rabbi Nachman was correct and Rabbi Nachman's teachings are the only way to function, but Basof, when a person hits the limit point in their lives, the only way to get behind it or beyond it is through the Torah of Rabbi Nachman. It's the only Torah that works there. It's the only one that continues to remain functional when all of the external pillars of support fall away. Rabbi Nachman is the one, because he was the tzaddik who came to teach about Emunah, who teaches us that wherever you go, there you are, and that there is an impossible notion that wherever you fall, you are going to come to meet the place where you can find more faith with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not only in the place before Yeush, but even in the place of after Yeush. And not only in those things that you think are bad, but even in those things that you don't even want to admit to yourself. And all of the impossible pockets of darkness that each and every neshama who exists in this generation, in the particular potency of the Gevuros at the end of existence, at the end of history prior to Mashiach. So the neshamos of our generation, what we feel, what we go through, the descent, the dips, the Mesiras Nefesh, the depth of it all is unfathomable. And the only Torah, the only illumination, the only path of a tzaddik that is always shining, no matter where a person falls. So no matter how deep the darkness one is digging for themselves or that is being dug for them, and whatever the circumstances of our lives might be, Rahman al-Islam, there is a light that is always already at the bottom prior to us getting there, and that is the light of the Or Zarua L'Tzadik U'Liyishrei Lev Simcha, the light of Tzadik Yisod Olam. The fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed the principle in this world that there's such a thing as a tzaddik, a person, a refinement of the body and the soul within concealment itself that has the ability of getting it right, or as close to right as it can possibly be done, to give us hope, to give us strength, to learn from experience, to pick up on the eitzos, pshutos, to learn to clarify our imaginations in accordance with how that tzaddik thought, or at least our grasp of how that tzaddik thought, to identify with the bittul muchletes and the utter self-nullification that the tzaddik represents, and which immediately, whenever there's self-nullification, there's a hashras hashchina, and that the tzaddik is a shliach tzibor. But without Rabbi Nosson, we would have never known that there was a minyan, there was a shliach tzibor like Rabbi Nachman. And Rabbi Nosson understood that this shliach tzibur, this person who's davening to be yotzei the klal from their struggles, just like a shliach tzibur, they don't have any power without the klal. They're given their strength from the kehila themselves. A shliach tzibur without a kehila is a meaningless thing. And so Mamela, Rabbi Nosson understood that the chavraya that are going to make up this minyan, that are going to populate the base medrash of Breslov, are going to be the neshamos at the very end who feel the struggle in the most intense way. They are the ones who walk around with the hearts of stone. They're the ones who walk around having undergone so many moments in that place of concealment prior to the revelation of God. As the Baal Tanya said, that Hasidim are neshamos that were in hell, and in hell there's an interdiction on the revelation of godliness, and there's a starvation and a yearning and a craving for godliness. And the moment that that soul is allowed to come back out of hell, to come back into this world and try and transform it into a Gan Eden again, so all they can do is run after Hasaga Salikus, Hasaga, more and more Hasaga, because we've been so deprived, it's been so hidden from us for so long that we need the most potent medicine. And Rabbi Nosson understood what Rabbi Nachman was doing. Rabbi Nosson says, Ashreinu sheyesh lanu rofe kazeh. Praiseworthy are we who have a doctor like this, the Roif Neshamos, the person who has that healing salve of Torah that knows how to speak to the particular struggles of each and every subjective soul in its subjective orientation. Rabbi Nachman, Rabbi Nosson are never talking about when you do this or that in a specific way. It's always Kisha Adam nofel lemakom shenafal, ukisha Adam nimtze es atzmo b'makom hachoshech shu nafal bo. It's always a nondescript description of a struggle, because it's not about the what a person is going through. It's about the fact that a person persists in the struggle and continues to break on through to the other side, fighting through the tendencies towards yeyish, towards darkness, towards sadness, and overcoming it with simplicity, joy, and a radical annihilation of the intellect, where I allow myself to live with wonder and imagination, dancing through life because I choose to. That's the secret of what Rabbi Nosson saw by Rabbi Nachman. He understood that this is a doctor, but he didn't necessarily see the sickness, because people didn't admit how sick they were back then. And the souls were bigger and they had the capacity to hold their sickness. But there comes a generation, there comes a time of Ikavsad Mashiach, where there's a real sickness, there's a thirst, there's a parchedness of the spirit, that it yearns for something that it knows not how to gain, and it's perpetually seeking out that which it feels it deserves but is incapable of grabbing hold of. And this thirst, this intoxicating thirst that the generation goes through, is perpetually seeking out meaning, something that is going to heal my broken heart, something that is going to transform the heart of stone that doesn't feel anything at all to a heart of flesh, which is transformed into the sight of joy. And that's what Rabbi Nosson understood. He said there's going to be a generation that's really going to be incapable of hiding the symptoms anymore. The sickness of the body, of the soul, of the neshama, the tzabrachenkait, and for good reason. Neshamas Yisrael has been through so much through its descent from under the Kisei HaKavod and even higher down to the lowly state in which we live, which is the palace that the king decided to build on a dunghill. In this place, in this Dir B'Tachtonim. And there's going to be a generation where the neshama is going to feel it so much that it's not going to be able to survive without the light of Rabbi Nachman. And yes, our generation, says Rabbi Nosson, would benefit from this, but that's not enough to force me to write every single thing down and ensure that everything is kept for perpetuity and that every single thing is going to be maintained for Kislu Zois Ledor Acharon. This is being written for the generation that is to come, says Rabbi Nosson. As the pasuk by Matan Torah explicitly states, it's not just for you, it's for everybody who's going to come in the future as well. Rabbi Nosson, a true Talmud, has that ability to intuit and say, yeah, this is a sound that's necessary for me, and it's a sound that's also going to be very necessary for the future, and it's up to me to transform this momentary illumination of light into a lasting expression of a sustainable spirituality that is miraculous in its redemptive and calming, pleasant ways. The Daracheha Darchei Noam, the Nachal Neveh Makor Chachma. Without Rabbi Nosson's foresight, we don't have this. Without Rabbi Nosson's understanding that there's something here that must be protected, there's something here that must be saved, because there will come a time where the only medicine imaginable is going to be the medicine of the Torah of Breslov, of Lev Basar. The whole tachlis of Breslov is to create a vulnerable, feeling heart, to allow Bina to do its work, to allow the mind to express itself through simplicity and silence and joy and acceptance, and a simplicity that is not numb to the complications of each and everything, but just doesn't have the time. a soul that's so fundamentally aware of the fact that I live once and this moment only takes place once. And because this moment only takes place once, this moment right here, right now, is in fact the fullest expression of revelation. And therefore, when Rabbi Nosson asks Rabbi Nachman, what's your favorite mitzvah? It's whatever I'm doing at this moment, because hayom im b'kolo tishma'u. With that perspective, there's no time. There's no time to try and deal with the complications. I can spend eternity dealing with complications, and all I'll find is more complications. The secret of Pashat acting like a fool by throwing away my mind and choosing joy and radical affirmation in this moment. That was the only thing that Rabbi Nachman felt was going to break us free from the stupor and talking to God in our personal language. And Rabbi Nosson understood that this is so necessary. How did Rabbi Nosson understand that it was so necessary? Rabbi Nosson writes in numerous places, in particular in Alim L'Trufa, that the reason that I know Rabbi Nachman's Torah is so true and so potent and so necessary for each and every person is because it speaks to a person as far and as low as me. That's what Rabbi Nosson said. The proof of the validity of the teachings and the redemptive nature and the unprecedented nature of the Nachal Naveh Makor Chachma, Rabbeinu Nachman ben Fega, Zchus Yogan Aleinu, is the fact that it could speak to a heart like mine, says Rabbi Nosson. It can go all the way down to where I find myself. Now, this was a klal by the Talmidim of the Tzaddikim Amitim in general. The Talmidim of the Magid, they would try and go and visit the Magid, and they would get stuck in a krechma along the way. And they would beat Sabrach, and they said, I want to be close to my tzaddik. I didn't come here to be alone in the forest. And then they would make a cheshbon to themselves, and they would say, this is what Rosh Shlomo Karliner said. He said, you know what? My Rebbe is the Rebbe of the entire world. And I'm the lowest of his Talmidim. I sit at the end of the table. Memela, wherever I am is the end of my Rebbe's table, and therefore I'm at the table. That perspective was held by the true Talmidim of Tzaddikim, but for Rabbi Nosson, it spoke to a deeper place. It spoke to that heart of stone, Steinhart's. Now, I don't know the etymology or the meaningfulness of the surname Steinhart's, but Rabbi Nosson writes something about Rabbi Nachman, that the Iker Tachlis of Breslov is to be mahapich the Lev ha'even into a Lev basar, to transform the heart of stone into a heart of flesh, to allow oneself to be vulnerable in their human element and not to let that take them away from the encounter with absolute and utter dveikus, but rather to allow each moment of being human, specifically being a human being who sits on the chair, something the malachim can't understand. Every single ounce of that experience, the lower down it goes, the deeper down it goes, the more opportunity I have to be mahapech everything l'sason l'simcha v'yanusu yagan v'anacha. The emerging darkness, the gathering up of those angels of despondency in our minds, all of that are only preparations for the radical shine of joy that disperses them immediately. And not only disperses them, but forces them to join the circle. It wasn't enough to disperse the sadness. It was fundamental to take the energy of the sadness, because that place of Yeyushkeit and Sabrachenkeit and those Gevuros, anybody who learns Likutei Moharan and learns Rabbi Nosson understands that these tzaddikim are speaking about Tzimtzum and the potency of Tzimtzum and the potency of Choshech more than any other tzaddik. They're the ones who take the Kalim and the Gevuros and the Bina, and they utilize it to express the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in untold ways. But that's also why they have to protect us over and over and over and over again, to just be besimcha, to choose to live a life of joy, to choose in this moment to orient myself towards a life of joy. And when Rabbi Nosson felt that he could do that, that the Torah was speaking to him in that place, that was the proof that this was something that was necessary for everybody. This was the secret of Yehoshua to Moshe. The light of Moshe is a potent light, but it cannot be drawn down without the vessels of Yehoshua. Yehoshua is the Talmud, is the shine that comes about by way of concealment itself, the concealment for the sake of revelation, that the vessel forces the light to express itself in accordance with particularized measurements, just as the Rebbe is forced to align the methodology of teaching with the vessels of the student. The moon, the reflection of the moon is far lower than the light, but without the moon, the sun is inaccessible. Without the Talmud, the Rebbe is inaccessible. The Rebbe, the Tzaddik, those things that stand in kind of transcendent states, they're inaccessible to us without the levushim or the garments of the Talmidim, without the levushim and the garments and the concealment valves that reveal so that I can grasp it in an imaginable way, in a manageable way. That's the illumination of the moon, which even though it's darkened and it's diminuted and it's lower and it's small, nevertheless, the role that it plays is on a certain level far more significant than the sun itself. That without the Talmidim, without Rabbi Nosson, we don't have Rabbi Nachman. Without translation, we don't have Lashon HaKodesh. Without Torah Sheba'al Peh, we don't have access to Torah Shebachsav. Without Yehoshua, we don't have access to Moshe Rabbeinu. Without the Torah, we don't have access to Hashem. Without Tefillah, we don't have access to Hashem. It's always fundamentally the lower level that, in spite of the fact that it appears to be a degradation away from the ideality of the sun, it's ultimately always a descent for the sake of an eventual ascent, where it's the secret of Metamida Yoter Mikulam. That Rabbi Nosson is each and every one of us. Each and every person is Rabbi Nosson to the light of the tzaddikim that they choose to live in accordance to in this world. Each person with their universe of tzaddikim, each person with the tzaddikim that they choose to connect to, each one of the svarim that a person connects to, the living tzaddik that rests within the books, the tzaddik asad olam in the generation. Each and every person lives in accordance with their perspective and their referential point to the light of tzaddikim. And in accordance with our own subjective heart, we are Rabbi Nosson. Each and every person is revealing a particular hue of the lights of the tzaddikim, which is Moshe Rabbeinu and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and the Arizal and the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh and Rabbi Nachman, Nachal Leveim, or Kol Chachma, and the tzaddikim in our generation. Each and every one of us have the unique opportunity through our own chasronos, through those feelings that Rabbi Nosson felt, which was that if it works for me, then it works for everybody. And each and every one of us have to identify that place where the healing salve of the miraculous waters of the Nachal Neveim or Kol Chachma give us most healing, where I can't believe that it's giving me healing there. I can't believe it's enabling me to function. And in that place, we become Rabbi Nosson. And in that place, we magnify the light of the tzaddik. Because Metamida Yoter Mikulam. And there's a Pishnayim, the Torah, which we're not going to learn tonight, which I planned on learning tonight, is Torah Samach Vav. Vayihi Pishnayim Biruchecha. The whole Torah of Rabbi Nachman here is the descent for the sake of the ascent, but it's specifically through the descent into that which appears secondary that we can return back to the original light with a newfound doubling expression where we uncover the true depth of it. That if the tzaddik doesn't descend down to the Talmud and the Talmud doesn't minimize and condense and develop and reveal in their own particular way the light of the tzaddik with the refinement of imagination and with the proper zichuch and the refinement of the self so that it doesn't interfere, God forbid, with the light of the tzaddik, so that the Talmud's self doesn't interfere. But Rabbi Nachman gave Rabbi Nosson medamim mezuchach, Rabbi Nosson said, that he gave me a clarified imagination, which meant that there was no psolas in his Torah, that the associations that Rabbi Nosson was making were true associations. They weren't just the freedom of thought because no one was going to say no, but rather they were essential in their nature. It's the secret of the moon becoming a mamish, a reflection of the light. The or halavana ka or hachama. The light of the sun is the light of the moon is never exactly like the light of the sun. The Talmud is never like the Rebbe. Yoshua is never Moshe Rabbeinu, and creation is never HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the sun and the moon can become equal in the value that they bring to the illumination of the sun. Because without the moon, without the deficiency, without the tzimtzum that is the Talmud, without the Rebbe Nosson who's able to say that I have a heart of stone, Steinhart's is a heart of stone. It's a leiv ha'even, it's that concealment. And the ikr nakuda is to come to be megala leiv basar. And this is what Rabbi Nosson said after he met Rabbi Nachman, but Breslev boer eish. There's a fire that's burning in Breslov. Where do I want that fire to be placed? In my heart, to break free from the leiv ha'even, that unfeeling stuckness. And part of what Breslov does, instead of teaching us how to move away from that unfeeling stuckness, it just says, like, dance beyond it. Draw that into the dance itself. Who said the unfeeling stuckness is not part and parcel of the avodah? It's specifically where you're at, that you're meant to overcome that whisper of Yeyush Rahman al-Itzlan that comes about from the self-doubt that reflects itself and projects itself into other people's minds. So it reflects itself externally as what other people doubt in the person. But in truth, all that's really taking place is the person's own self-doubt about themselves. And in that place, specifically to uncover the secret of Ein Shem Yesh Ba'olam Klal and Asur Lehit Ya'ish, and to make Freilich Zayin and to make Chedushay Torah there. This was why Rabbi Nosson gave us the Likutei Halachos. Likutei Halachos is mamish halacha is Hariyu LaHashem Kol Haaretz. It's the mundane, ordinary, day in, day out repetition of day-to-day religious experience. Ritualistic. Something that appears at first glance to very quickly lose the potency of the spiritual experience it's meant to convey. and drawing down the light of the Nachal Nevei Makor Chachma, the Eitzos Ha'amukos that come about from Atik Yom and Mamish. It's taking the light of Keser and drawing it all the way down into Malchus. That's the avoid of the Talmud. Because when the light of Keser, when the aura of Rabbeinu's Torah is able to be Meskala in the Shulchan Aruch itself, within the Shulchan Aruch, in the Pratei Pratim of the Shulchan Aruch. So it's from that place that we see, oh my goodness, the applicability of this blinding light of Rabbi Nachman's Avodah comes all the way down to this place as well. And in that place, it reflects back upwards to the magnificent depth of Rabbi Nachman's light. Rabbi Nachman originally wanted to write for us a beer on the Shulchan Aruch. He wasn't Zocha, so he gave us the Likutei Moharan. It's only Rabbi Nosson who's able to give us the Likutei Halachos. It's only the Talmud who's able to be nichnas into Eretz Yisrael. And again, the Hasidim of Breslov were called Toiter Hasidim. They were referred to as the dead Hasidim because they didn't have a living Rebbe. Rabbi Nosson was not a Rebbe. Rabbi Nosson was a Talmud who was an actual Talmud and didn't want to usurp the position of the Rebbe. He understood the hyper significance of being a Talmud, and being a Talmud was the guise of being a Rebbe. Yeshua was a Rebbe. Yeshua was a Shemesh to the generation in Eretz Yisrael. But it was only because he understood himself as being the sun to the moon, to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Raya Mehemna, to Shechina Medaberes Misof Grono. And this is why, other than Rosh Hashanah and Tikkun Klali and the secret hope that persists at all things, what is most emphasized so persistently at the heart of Likutei Halachos is the secret of the Ner Tamid, of the Talmid HaChai, that they're living Talmidim in each and every generation of the Tzaddik. That each and every one of us are carrying the torch of the Mahalach of Rabbi Nachman and Rabbi Nosson. It's not a dead Chasidus. It's a Chasidus that is so potent that it can give life to the dead, that it can take a dead heart and it could reawaken it, and it can break open the Lev Ha'evan and reveal the Lev Basar within it. Toiter Chasidim is not an insult. It was meant to be an insult, but in truth, it was the deepest secret. It was the secret that even when we're in a place of being toiter, even when we're in a place of death, even when it's a place of ragleha yardumavis, even it's a place in the darkness of the forest where it's terrifying at night, it's specifically there that will come to reveal the deepest blinding light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the secret of his poididus, where a person takes their lowest elements and they bring them back up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to create the secret of sha'ashua, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mishta'ashea with each and every problem that we have. And this is why when Rabbi Nosson was being chased, even worse than Rabbi Nachman was, the enemies of Rabbi Nosson were throwing stones at him. They were throwing stones at Rabbi Nosson. And that's when Rabbi Nosson began to sing his song that the Rebbe sings so beautifully, Eza Groiskeit, Veza Sheinkeit. When Mashiach is coming, how pleasant it's going to be, how wondrous things are going to be. When Mashiach arrives, why are they throwing stones at Rabbi Nosson? Because the avoid of Breslov is to be mahapich l'leiv ha'evan into a leiv basar. The person, a Breslover chassid, is a leiv basar, a feeling vulnerable thing that owns its deficiencies and transform its deficiencies into the place where we can reveal the sha'ashuim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to connect deeper to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Od Yoter Tov, specifically within the particularities of halacha itself. And to throw stones to a leiv basar is to transform the leiv evan into a leiv basar, to take all of the avanim, to take all of the concealment and the heaviness and the tzimtzumim, and to be mamtik them, to elevate them all the way back up in the secret of the Likutei Tfilos, in the secret of transforming our Torah into tefillah, which is antithetical to the spiritual quest. Torah is higher than tefillah on a gradational level. Torah, Tiferes, Kudsha B'richu, grasp, intellectualism, the neshama, it's much higher than the leiv. So then what could it possibly be that I'm meant to transform my Torah into a tefillah? It seems that I'm taking Chaye Oilam and drawing it down into Chaye Shah. But Adrabah Ibcha Mastaba, that's the secret of Breslov. You take the Chachma down into the Nun, into the Kalim of Malchus, and that's where the Nachas comes from, as Rabbi Nachman describes in the first Torah. They have to draw the illumination of the sun into the concealment of the moon, and it's there that the magic takes place. It's there that the Tav engraves itself. It's there that something happens. It's there that there's an actual tikkun. It's there that I can fix something. It's there that I can come in contact with reality and say, Adarabba, I can reveal you in this world. To take the Chaye Olam and collapse it into the Chaye Shah, Hayomim B'Kolo Tishma'u, as Rabbi Nosson explains, based on Rabbi Nachman's teachings, that the closer you get to Mashiach consciousness, the quicker time takes time. Like when a person is asleep and they're dreaming, it could be 15 minutes, but they've dreamt 1,000 years. Because the closer we refine ourselves and extricate ourselves out of the durational length and drudgery of time as we experience it down here, where time takes so much time, the higher and higher you go, the more refined it is, and the more time is condensed into a moment itself. This was Rabbi Nosson. Rabbi Nosson, they found Rabbi Nosson's pocket watch. And the most beautiful thing about Rabbi Nosson's pocket watch is that the hands had fallen off. It's a watch with no time being kept, almost as if every moment that Rabbi Nosson would look at this watch, it's just right now. There's no other time other than right now. And why Rabbi Nosson in Alim Trufa, when he's writing love letters to his son Rav Yitzchak, one of the most beautiful elements of what Rabbeinu brought into this world is that his Talmud Mufak Rabbi Nosson would spend so much time writing love letters to his son Yitzchak, because ultimately the only way to grapple with the reality of Yitzchak and Gvura and Dinim is by drawing down and remembering the words of the tzaddikim. The words of Rabbi Nachman came to be mamtik the dinim of Yitzchak, came to be mamtik tzimtzum. On his way to Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Nachman asked to be called Yitzchak. Don't call me Nachman, call me Yitzchak. Someone came to Rabbi Nosson with a problem. They wanted to name their son They wanted to name their son Nachman, but they had an ancestor Yitzchak that they had to name. Zok Rabbi Nosson, name him Yitzchak. It's better to name him Yitzchak because that's Koidel Nachman also. And Azoi, this is exactly what Rabbi Nosson did. And these love letters of Alim L'Trufa, they're the deepest, most potent forms of chizuk imaginable. And in these letters, Rabbi Nosson is always apologizing to his son. I don't have time. I'm in between, like the missing one train and another. I have 3 seconds. And then somehow, some way, 4 pages later, in the depth of this fluid thunderburst of chizuk and dripping with beauty and the condensation of Rabbeinu's words into mamish, bite-sized, manageable prescriptions and what to take and when to take it and how to walk with it. And somehow there was time. Somehow time opened up. Because when you look at the watch from the perspective of Hayom and B'kol Tishma'u, all it is right now. And then we could come back to that secret of when Rabbi Nosson asked Rabbi Nachman, what's the most important thing that you're doing? And he said, whatever I'm doing right now. And that's the way to break open into the heart. The heart might be a heart of stone right now, but right now it's no longer then, it's now. And each and every moment that I feel that it's a new opportunity. That's the chiddush of Rabbi Nachman. Perpetual chiddush, beginning again every second, finding nekudos tovos irreducibly so. There is never a moment of coming to consciousness that is devoid of my capacity to remember the positive points that rest hidden underneath all of the thickness of concealment and self-doubt. And when I uncover that positive point, I am creating the greatest sha'ashua and spiritual pleasure imaginable. That's why Hashem created the world. That's why Hashem wants this place, so that each and every one of us can scrub the diamonds from the mud and turn up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say, this is the Tikkun Klali. I'm not living in the Shir Pashut. I don't live in Atzilus. I'm not living in the Shir Kaful. I'm not in Bria. I don't live in the Shir Meshulash. I'm not even in Yetzira. I live in the Shir Meruba, in the halacha of it all, in the Hariyul Hashem Kol Haaretz, in the legs of it all. Because we're waiting for the legs. The legless beggar hasn't come yet. And we're waiting for the legless beggar, but for the time being, we're the stand-in for the legs. We're the stand-in, the dancing feet of Mashiach Tzidkenu is our generation, and the legs are trampled upon. And the legs are like the afar, and it's broken. But nevertheless, the afar holds the secret of afar de manakula, me tamida yoter mikulam, and that the vicissitudes of being a student and not being the center, and the grappling with ego that comes about as a result of that, and the slow and steady learning and unlearning of what it means to let go of the self and learn the art of bittul and not thinking about the self so constantly and overwhelmingly, that secret of being a Talmud, it's harder than being the tzaddik, as the Talmidim of Rabbi Nosson said. On a certain level, it's harder to be a chassid and to be a student than it is to be the tzaddik, because it takes that double level of bittul, but that's the pishnayim. The light of a student is the pishnayim, is that the Rebbe is only miskala himself fully through the student, and the student has the added ability to form the light of their tzaddik in accordance with the particular vessels that they are gifted with and that they function in accordance to, and can trust that on that level, they're the Rebbe Nosson. And each and every one of us are the Rebbe Nossons, Rebbe Nachman, and each and every one of us are the neshama hayachida that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world for, and each of us and every one of us have to see ourselves as the fundamental purpose and center of the entirety of reality. And it's in that place that each and every one of us can find our own world. In the secret of Oilamecha Tira B'chayecha, to be mamish a Talmud, to see ourselves as the Rebbe Nosson, to the light of spirituality that's coming down into the world, and to share it, and to break forward and share it, and to fulfill the dictum of what both Rebbe Nachman, the Balatanya, did, what both Rabbi Nosson and the students of the Balatanya did, which was Emasai Ka'asimar Keshayafutsamay Nosecha Chutzo Kashiyasa Yehudim Kamoischa. Hafatzas Hamayanos is something that Chabad has done incredibly well, but Rabbi Nosson is also fundamentally involved in Hafatzas Hamayanos, as we see already from the Talmidim of Rav Shik. But the avoid of Breslov is Kashayas and Yechudim Kamoischa, when a person can learn to live with unity, when a person can learn to make unifications like Chanuch, who was Tofer Na'alayim Haya, and to be mitboded in the forest, and to be not an ish kasher, but to be an animal that cries out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu from within that howling solitude of needing him and only him, and not wanting anything other than him, and wanting the relief that we so desperately need and know that can only come from him, and the secret of everything that Rabbeinu was all about, which was Geula and Vias HaMashiach, and the Yichud of Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben Yosef, and the train Mashiachim, which reveal themselves through the students bringing the tzaddik into Eretz Yisrael, that Moshe is not entering, but Yeshua enters, and our job is to draw the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu Rayam Hemna from the Talmud, the Lavhaganle, from the inappropriate burial place where he's buried by Klipa Sadas, Mu'ol Beis Pa'or, which is that opposite of himself, where he's buried in the Vav of Gichon, and he's buried in the deepest klipa imaginable. But it's specifically from there, from the Krach Gadol Shebarom, which are the concealment of the heart, and to break that open and to allow the Sha'arei Yerushalayim to open up, which is the gateway of the heart, and to enter into Tainus, the true simcha of Tainus. Is the Shir Pashut Kafel Mishulish Meruba element of it, as Rabbi Nosson writes, that every moment is an elongation of the fast, and the next moment demands that I return back to the original source of energy that I entered into the fast with, and to uncover more reserves so that I can move forward in the territory of my fast. And therefore, the fast is ultimately about the growth by way of incremental return back to source, and then slowly but surely pushing forward in the secret of the Shir Meruba of 1, 2, 3, 4 in the Tikkun Klali, being mataka in everything, to be mataka in everything, to believing in ourselves, to finding joy, to believing in joy, to believing in our fasting, to believing in our tshuva and our tefillah and our Torah and our chidushay Torah and our amuna, and all of the good things about ourselves, and to not take the bad things about ourselves so seriously, in the secret of what Rabbi Nosson's Iker Nekuda was Yom Kippur. And Rabbi Nachman said, I was Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi Nosson was Yom Kippur. And on Rabbi Nosson's deathbed, what they remembered him saying was, that we have to focus more on the Nekudas Tovos and forget about the negative points, and Odio Ter Tov, to be Zocha to the Gula of Mashiach, which is Nekudas Tovos, which is seeing ourselves as Rabbi Nosson himself, Be'ezras Hashem.